I'm Seth Oranburg at New York University Classical Liberal Institute as a co-director with my good friend Robert Miller, and I'm a professor of law at the University of New Hampshire Franklin Pierce School of Law. I started my legal career by looking at crowdfunding, regulation crowdfunding, meaning equity crowdfunding. And I've kind of circled back to it because it's been a massive failure. And I've been curious as to why and how we can do better. So I'm going to talk about regulation crowdfunding, but I actually wrote two papers for this conference by accident. Two papers is always better than one. Douglas Baird taught me that at University of Chicago. So, instead of trying to cram them into one, I wrote a technical paper. I'm happy to talk about some of the technical stuff about crowdfunding. But as I wrote it, I realized I was talking about something bigger, which was sort of a philosophy of regulation and a way of thinking about regulation as a scaffold for practical wisdom. And so I wrote a second paper, which is the one I'm kind of offering here, which is kind of the big picture, which I call From Anti-Bad to Pro-Good, to try to make it simple. And it's really a privilege to follow Lynn and Alex because their work on epistemic humility also kind of elevates I think the conversation around the boundaries of knowledge, and we've had some conversations around that. So so as I mentioned, my work is in crowdfunding and entrepreneurship primarily, and entrepreneurship is substantially about decision-making under uncertainty. It's almost like the definition in some ways of how entrepreneurship is different from sort of order of public company kind of business. It's much more under nighty and uncertainty, and that requires wisdom because you can't make decisions based on knowledge. So I'm using Aristotle's term phrónēsis, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly for the philosophers in the room, and you'll excuse me if I'm not. As I understand it, the idea of practical wisdom, and I'm asking the question, can we treat law not as a gatekeeper, which prevents bad things from happening, but as I'm going to use the image of a gardener that cultivates good things to happen, which might actually scaffold pro-good law. And it actually comes very closely, I think, to the previous paper on regulatory humility, because it's really the humble gardener would maybe be a better imagery, where a person recognizes, or an institution recognizes, not only its own limits, but the fundamental limits of institutions and sort of binds itself. So I have about 12 minutes that I'll try to talk about the frenetic challenge and this gatekeeper and gardener metaphor. Talk about a few moves that we could make generally. Happy to talk about crowdfunding specifically, and then invite some dialogue. So the fundamental principle that I draw this from is the distinction between risk and uncertainty, which is more than just semantics. And it's not a sharp distinction, perhaps, but maybe we think about a spectrum where all decisions have some degree of uncertainty because there's some degree of unknowability. I think quantum physics sort of teaches us that there are non-probabilistic outcomes in the universe simply as the nature of the universe. So I mean that at a very fundamental level. But as we get to very large objects and very large data sets, we get very high degrees of predictability given enough information and knowledge and processing power. And so there's sort of the spectrum between risk and uncertainty. And uncertainty, again, are those contexts where probabilities are incalculable. And so you consider an example was raised earlier, which I'll draw from, which was like the proliferation of hub and spoke model for airports, sort of not predictable. Also like novel biotechnology platforms, or there's no historical data necessarily for how artificial intelligence is going to impact society. So we have to make wise decisions around these kind of contexts. And our regulators are making these decisions, but they're going to probably try to prevent bad things from happening as opposed to scaffolding really wonderful things for happening in society with regard to AI, for example. So what we need is phrónēsis, which is reason about what is good and fit to be done in a particular circumstance, and it's distinguished as I kind of maybe superficially understand it from scientific knowledge or episteme or technical skill, or techne, or even Sophia, which is sort of a theoretical wisdom. And this is the linkage between the episteme and the theoretical wisdom, where we actually know what to do when the pathway is not clear. And this is not just an individual phenomenon, because institutions can also both inherently display wisdom or folly or foolishness, but they also can cultivate it in people. So I was having a really enlightening conversation with Jason last night where he helped me think of some business-oriented language about this, and maybe a framing is that organizations operate at a macro level in business theory, and law is on top of that at sort of a meta-macro level, and it would inform how organizations form themselves, And within those organizations, we would see groups of people at the meso level who are engaging in collective decision-making, which might be wise or foolish. And so law actually might have a role, maybe 1 degree removed, by informing how organizations form and collaborate, which would inform how the groups within them operate, and we could either produce wisdom or folly at that level as well. So collective phronesis emerges when groups learn to reason together under uncertainty and to produce good results. And I just want to be clear, I'm not saying that crowds are always wise. In fact, that's the whole point. Crowds make all kinds of fundamental errors, and I try to draw from crowd science to identify those errors and their causes, but some are very well known, like information cascades and herding behaviors and celebrity focus, and I've identified 8 or 9 of those in some other works. But and again, I think I'm really agreeing with Alex and Lynn in that targeted regulation that identifies these problems and creates structures that resolves them in particular contexts, like celebrity focus and the kind of emphasis on celebrity influence might be really important for consumer-based crowdfunding operations, where there's a lot of focus on hype and products and influencers. And as people are doing that as an investment, it may matter more about how we control that. Whereas it may not be as impactful in a business-to-business kind of situation, or if someone's offering a finance opportunity for a new derivative or some product. So the law can adopt a gatekeeper model in which it focuses on how to prevent bad things, and that's kind of what we do as lawyers. Is we think about all the harms that can happen in the world, and I kind of hate it, to be honest with you. Like, I'm kind of tired of being like the world's biggest pessimist and spending all of my time in research thinking about every bad thing that could happen and how do we stop it from happening. And maybe I'm just sick of it, and I'm trying to think of how can we promote goodness or the good. So I think this mindset mirrors the epistemic hubris of Mises, of Ludwig von Mises, who criticized central economic planning not just because of socialism's values, but its epistemic posture and the idea that a centralized authority can't allocate resources and can't make these sort of decisions. So in some work that I have ongoing, I'm also thinking about how Congress could retake and rejuvenate its own role as being the civic center for this discussion, because as I'm just throwing stuff in the pot out here and hoping you help me sort it out, another question is who makes the decisions? How do we focus this? Civic organizations might decide that we adopt a different posture. So this posture would be, to kind of continue my humble gardener model, would be a different role for regulators, where they sort of prepare the soil by structuring entry points, rewarding thoughtful participation, providing incentives that are other than, right now we have wealth thresholds. Like if you have $1 million, you can do stuff. If you have less than $1 million, you can't do stuff. Because if you have $1 million, you're smart. And if you have less than $1 million, you're dumb. And this does not necessarily incentivize ideal behavior. We could have a different kind of threshold, like if you have a certain level of training, or if you take a particular course, or if you get, a certain number of upvotes or something in some kind of crowd wisdom, you get access to more risky investments or something like that. This would also encourage sandbox approaches, kind of planting diverse seeds or allowing a million flowers to bloom and sort of cultivating and pruning as opposed to selecting in advance. Ensuring that there's enough cross-pollination, that there's visibility, that these sandboxes are open spaces where one of the conditions of being in a regulatory sandbox is sort of openness and disclosure, so that what you gain is regulatory advantage, but you don't gain competitive advantage, perhaps. And removing what is not working as things go along, because as I've learned from working with AI, you need a human in the loop with every kind of system. So if we're going to have a system that we allow proliferation, I think a lesson we've learned from AI is we want a human in the loop at multiple iterations, and that's where the wisdom of a regulator can really come in, is to step in and say, these, maybe every year they go into the sandbox and they go into the experimentation area, and they prune so that they don't just allow it to sort of become destroyed over whatever the 5-year period is. So this is a shift in focus. This is a shift in orientation. This is a shift in temporal stance. We're a shift in the view of the actors, and a shift in the role of failure as well. So one thing that lawyers are very uncomfortable with, and I find it difficult to teach lawyers how to be comfortable with, is failure. The law is predominantly about a success and about sort of victory, and yet that's not where learning happens. and that's not where we're going to gain wisdom. Wisdom is gained through failure and error, and so one of the moves would be creating space where we actually are going to have fraud. We're going to cultivate environments that there's going to be error. There's going to be, people taking undue risks. There's going to be loss. There's going to be harm. The optimal amount of harm is not zero, right? So that posture is very unusual for law. We're uncomfortable with it. By the way, I don't have a strategy for we'll get some psychologists in here to figure out how to change the idea. So some principles that would embody this, for example, in crowdfunding, which again, I'm happy to talk about in Q&A if you want the technical, but I'm trying to go to the meta macro level, I guess. But to briefly talk about the structure is adaptive entry tiers. So graduated systems of participation in risky financial markets. Yep, 5 minutes. Adaptive entry tiers. So instead of maybe a $1 million wealth threshold that allows you to invest in high-risk investments or not, there could be interactive learning modules. There could be peer review exercises. There could be knowledge requirements. These are easy to do now, thanks to, as I aforementioned, AI. It's not difficult. We actually can get knowledge about investors' capacity, as opposed to using some of our dumb proxies. I do mean that in terms of dumb, they're very blunt, a wealth threshold is not an intelligent proxy. An intelligent proxy would actually reach out to the individual and assess things. Real-time feedback dashboards. So again, having publicly available information about success and failure on an ongoing basis, and demanding and requiring sort of internal visibility at a level that would not be expected of a private company that's sort of the price of participation is transparency. Mandatory disclosures, feedbacks with key performance indicators, spotting AI that spots emerging risks like delayed project launches or team turnover and flags it, and identifies patterns of success. And also the crowd can do that. Polycentric sandbox networks, so systems of regional, sectoral, or thematic sandboxes. So rules can be tested in parallel. Not the idea of sort of one giant sandbox, but this is a sandbox for X. This is the laboratory where we're experimenting on Y. You choose your own adventure as to where it goes in, but the idea is and by the way, the SEC is doing this. Monday, there was an announcement that we're going to have regulatory sandboxes for decentralized exchanges, which are a new way of identifying who owns traditional stocks and bonds. It's a merger of traditional finance and decentralized finance. So we're going to see a very specific regulatory sandbox that deals with the plumbing and so this is an example of that at a federal level. I'm kind of coming to time, so mentioning sunset clauses, renewal clauses were another one that I was mentioned previously, and they prevent rules from ossifying. They prevent the sort of path dependence that fundamentally emerges and can block wisdom, because path dependency is a type of crowd failure to sort of follow the behavior. And constructive failure protocols. So this is the most fundamental change that I really don't know how to implement is a culture where failure is not only acceptable but sort of celebrated, and identifying the major failures not as a reason to go to jail, and not as the price of failure should not be the orange jumpsuit, but an award, because you've taught us something valuable about the world that we can use to succeed in the future. Commemorating failure as a learning event in a sandbox environment where you sort of have permission to fail is, I think, the most fundamental thought shift. So given that I'm short on time, I could apply this to regulation crowdfunding, and I did in my paper. We could also apply it to decentralized exchanges and various other financial regulations and maybe beyond. But I'll just use my last minute to maybe make a call for this, because I'm not a philosopher, I'm a lawyer, and I guess I'm really a law professor who's tired of teaching people how to be police and to manage risk, as opposed to, as a transactional lawyer, I've had the joy of creating new opportunities and working with business and management and thinking about how to invite the good. So could a wisdom of crowds help us to combine with sort of prudent cultivation and a new regulatory stance, change some of our modalities from being anti-bad to being pro-good? And I think that the beauty of this very simple framing is that people understand what I'm talking about, and then I can also use like the complicated philosophy terms that show that this is like actually based in like 2,500 years of wisdom. But the idea is that we can achieve the good in society not by having a regulatory framework that only stops bad things, but that cultivates good things. And I think that we've got to a point in time where we actually have a lot of the knowledge tools to cultivate wisdom. So thanks.